No, I served you with it because I didn't know if I was going to use it. Okay. And instead of have serves, you're not going to serve. But I made up my mind probably when we go out for lunch. Okay. All right. Fair enough. You know what happens? Yep. Spent 15 minutes having that explain. You know, I heard what you know. Yep. We're going to do that. So the only analysis was not as worse as I heard it was not. It was not. So leave it there.
Okay. Yeah, he could be in the constant. Okay. Let's see. Okay.
papers. All right. Good afternoon. You may be seated. All right, fellas, back on. Let's call you next witness.
Your Honor, the defense would call Jerry Morton.
You may. Come on up, Mr. Morton. Go ahead and have a seat, folks.
Thank you.
Go ahead and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony shall give this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
May you lower your hand. Please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Jerry Morton, Jerry Morton.
And Mr. Morton, where are you coming from to be with us here today?
Jacksonville, Florida.
And what do you do in Jacksonville, Florida?
I work for GE.
And in what capacity do you work for GE today?
I'm a senior engineer.
In 2010, where were you employed?
For General Electric here in Atlanta.
Do you have the same position then?
No, I was a quality lead at the time in engineering.
Now, would you mind explaining what a quality lead is?
Yeah, I was a quality QMS lead. I was responsible. I was also an auditor. Our quality group, we had auditors who were certified through GE or externally. I was also responsible for a segment of an engineering group for their QMS requirements and documentation. We would ensure that ISO or other regulations or standards requirements were flowed down into our processes and procedures, and their engineering teams and other teams within GE actually met those requirements.
And you may have said it, but where in 2010 were you located?
In Atlanta. I was in building 4200.
Now, how long have you been with GE?
10 years.
As of now or back then?
Now, 10 years.
Would that mean, did you start in 2006?
Yes. Was one, it could be 2 or 3.
Okay. Was that per week?
Yes.
Okay. Now, were these individual meetings? Were they group meetings?
Most were group meetings. We would have a one-on-one. I don't recall. I think it was every 2 weeks. And usually a brief 30-minute meeting.
Now, without discussing any of what you talked about specifically in any given meeting, would you please describe to the jury how Mr. Neuman would conduct these meetings?
He always had a topic. There was a purpose to every meeting. He was very assertive, very confident in the meetings. He usually took the lead. Occasionally he would ask someone else to lead the meeting depending on the topic and someone's expertise on the topic.
With the description that you just gave, would that be accurate for both the individual meetings and the group meetings?
Always the group meetings. The one-on-ones were more informal.
Now, I believe you described just a few minutes ago that your desk was located close to Mr. Newman's office.
Yes.
Was the whole time that he was your manager, was that the case?
Up until probably a month before the murder,
Okay.
I was transferred to another building.
Now, we talked about some meetings and then your interactions with Mr. Newman in the workplace. Did you have a relationship with Mr. Newman outside of the context of him as your manager and you as an employee working for him?
No.
Did you ever have opportunities within your professional relationship to discuss personal issues?
It would be rare. We occasionally would talk about our children. I knew he had, I think, twins in high school or about to go to Georgia Tech. I had a son who was touring Europe with a rock band at the time. So, I mean, just those chit-chats, but that would be rare.
Did you ever socialize with Mr. Newman outside the context of this GE relationship?
Rarely. Once both teams went to see a Braves game. It was a GE setting. He would have holiday parties or a Christmas party. You know, that'd be once. And I think on a couple of occasions when we had new hires, new engineers, or new quality individuals into the team, we would have a lunch. I think I probably went to a couple of luncheons with Hemy and the new hire.
We've talked about some of the meetings that you've had with him and some of your interactions with Mr. Newman at GE. Do you recall anything particular about a meeting that you had with Mr. Newman on November the 17th, 2010?
If that's the day before the murder, I do. When you say November 17th, on that day, he did call a meeting.
Tell us what was the meeting about, just generally?
I'm not sure I knew the topic till I showed up, which was a little unusual, but it was on a new way to audit. He had some highly experienced auditors who were direct reports of his. And so he actually, there were two other colleagues there, Hemy and then Rusty Sneiderman sitting to his right. He talked about the topic for a few minutes and went to the board and began drawing a process map. Very quickly, I mentioned to Hemy that we're already doing that process. It's already
Okay, so let me slow you down just a second. Was this a meeting that was organized by Mr. Newman?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember who attended that meeting?
Yes.
Who was that?
It was Hemy, Andrea, myself, and two other GE colleagues.
Do you know their names by any chance?
Yes.
Can you say them?
Ann Habahazi, and I think it was Martise Nash.
Are these all individuals that are on the quality team?
Martise Nash was a master black belt, I think. He was a black belt. He could have been at a higher level at MBB, but it's a role within GE for Six Sigma.
I'm not pretending that I know what
Okay.
most of that meant. We're not talking about karate, right?
Right. No, we're
Okay.
not. Yeah. Statistics.
Statistics.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, I believe you said that Mr. Newman once you had gotten to the meeting, began describing a process to you.
Correct.
Okay. Did you say that that was a process regarding auditing?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you had talked to us that in the context of these group meetings that Mr. Neuman normally would take the lead. Did he take the lead in this particular meeting, as you said, the day before the murder?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you described that we were talking about an auditing process. Was the auditing process that was discussed in that meeting, were you previously familiar with that process?
Yes.
Okay. How were you previously familiar with that process?
It's a process we had already implemented. I'm guessing 3, 4, 5, 6 months earlier.
Okay. Now, when you say a process that we had already implemented, will you please just explain to me who you mean by we?
The auditors, the audit team that Hemy had. We were already doing the process the way he began to prescribe in a process map.
Okay. And just to make sure that I'm clear, that you said the auditing team, is that the same as this quality?
Yes.
Quality group? Okay.
Yes.
Now, I believe what you just said was that you just described a process. You said that you had already been using the process for
Correct.
3, 4, 5 months. Did you bring this to Mr. Newman's attention?
Yes.
Okay. How did you do so?
I actually spoke up and said, Hemy, we're actually doing that process now. We're actually, as we scope a process, the way you're describing, we're doing that exactly now. We're going to that point and working back upstream.
Now, as far as you could tell from his actions, did he hear that question?
Yes, he actually turned around, just like you. He just turned around and faced me.
Okay. And then what did he do next?
He looked at me, eye contact, and then he looked above my head, and there was nothing said.
Did the meeting continue after that interaction?
After a pause, no comment, it did. He went immediately back to the board and began drawing the flow chart, the process map again.
Now, when you're saying the flow chart and the process again, is this the same process? that you were
Same
describing?
process, yes.
Okay.
And this is the auditing process.
The auditing process, yes. Auditing, yes.
Was the auditing process that he was drawing, I believe you described a flow chart,
Correct.
was that flow chart part of what you had already implemented?
Yes.
Now, as the meeting continued, did you ever articulate to Mr. Neuman again or multiple times that you were familiar with this process? And
Yeah, I actually did. Within just a few minutes, I reiterated that we're actually doing that process. We actually had another decision point in the process map. I said, Hemy, we're doing that also.
okay,
Same thing. He turned around, looked at me in the eyes, and then looked above my head, and then no response.
okay. Did that happen 2 times or more than 2 times?
It was at least 2 times. It could have been 3 or 4.
Now, in the years that he was your manager and the weekly meetings and individual meetings that you had you ever posed a question to Mr. Neuman where his response was to stare at you?
We always had good interaction. He was always very assertive and confident. I'd never seen him not answer, question or comment.
Was there anything about Mr. Newman's demeanor on that particular day that was different than the way he normally was in the meeting?
No.
Okay. Now, just to make sure that I have all this clear, at any point did you have the opportunity to learn that one of the other employees at GE's husband had been killed?
Yes.
Okay. When in relation to learning about that was this meeting?
I guess it was, I'm not sure if it was the day of the murder or the day after the murder. Hemy had sent emails. I think it was maybe 2 emails. Don't recall the nature other than one email said not to contact Andrea. I think there'd been a crisis or something to that effect. I don't recall the nature of the verbiage of the emails.
Sure. And I understand you may not remember the exact dates, but in relation to when the actual murder occurred, when was this meeting?
It would have been the next day. The murder was the day after the meeting.
Day after the meeting. Did you have any opportunity to communicate with Mr. Neuman the day after your meeting?
I was in another building. I don't recall, but I don't think there was any communication other than his emails.
What about in the months leading up to his arrest?
We still had meetings when he was at work.
Let me have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Nothing further this time, Your Honor.
All right. Whose witness is this? Mr. Neuman, you may proceed.
Mr. Morton, you indicated, sir, on direct, I think I wrote down the quote, you said the murder was the day after the meeting? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about the day before at this meeting. Would you describe Hemy Neuman as direct?
Very direct.
Okay. Would you describe him as assertive?
Most assertive.
Okay. Would you describe him as confident?
Always confident.
Okay. Would you describe him as analytical?
One of the most analytical people I've ever worked with.
Okay. Would you describe him as methodical?
At times, methodical.
Would you describe him as detail-oriented?
Very detailed.
Okay. Other than Hemy Neuman not responding to your statement that we're already implementing that process, was Hemy Neuman any different at that meeting on November 17th, 2010 than he was any other day that you worked with him?
No.
Okay. How about, let's go back, you said that you had worked with him since 2008?
Correct.
When in 2008?
I think I transferred from GE Rail in April of 2008.
Okay. So from April of 2008 to November of 2010, that's about 2.5 years or so? Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Okay. So in the 2.5 years that you worked with him, did you ever see anything that made you question his stability?
Never.
Okay. Did you ever see anything that made you think he was in any way, shape, or form hallucinating?
Never.
Ever seem to be talking to somebody that wasn't there?
Never.
Ever seem to be seeing something that anyone else wasn't seeing?
Never.
Okay. Did he ever seem anything other than the assertive, analytical, direct, methodical Hemy Neuman that you knew?
Only in that one meeting.
Okay. And in that meeting, he seemed a little preoccupied?
Distant, preoccupied, did not respond to my question.
Okay.
Right.
The rest of the meeting he conducted the rest of the meeting?
He conducted it very well.
Okay. So it was a good meeting?
It would have been a good meeting.
Okay. But you felt that
Yeah.
He didn't answer that? Okay. But everything else about the meeting was normal?
Yes.
Everything else about the meeting was logical?
Yes.
Everything about the meeting was the way that you would expect Hemy Neuman to run a meeting, except for him not responding to your
Yes.
statement? Okay. Okay. And is that the same Hemy Neuman that you knew in July of 2010? The guy who was methodical,
Yes.
analytical? Okay.
Yes.
Notice anything different about him in August of 2010?
Nothing.
No? September 2010?
Same.
Okay. So he's the same in October of 2010?
Correct.
And the same Hemy Neuman, same old Hemy in November of 2010, except for that one day,
Yes.
the day before, as you characterized it, the day before the murder,
Correct.
on November 17th, 2010. Okay. Anything about, you sat right outside his office, is that correct?
Yes.
And just to be clear to the jurors, you had an office outside of his office or a cubicle
No,
outside of his office?
A cubicle.
Okay, so it's like an open area
Yes.
with divided into cubicles. Okay. And in the fact that you sat outside his office, did he usually keep his door open or closed?
It was a mix.
Okay. On the times that he had his door open, were you able to see and hear him? in his office?
Occasionally.
Okay. Anything about anything that you heard or anything that you observed of his behavior as you were seated outside in your cubicle that made you question his mental stability?
Never.
That's all the questions I have, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Lawyers, may this witness be released and excused from subpoena. Do you want to remain on subpoena?
No objection, Your Honor.
Mr. Moore, thank you very much for coming. You're free to go.
Thank you.
I would like to turn flight back to Florida. Call your next witness. All right. Our lawyers approach momentarily. All right, ladies and yes, it is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the defense has rested. The next portion of the trial, the state will be calling additional witnesses for rebuttal purposes. Let me go ahead and answer this. Ironically, is your first afternoon, technically your first afternoon break. So, Deputy Gary. All right, ladies and yes, it is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the defense has rested. The next portion of the trial, the state will be calling additional witnesses for rebuttal purposes. Let me go ahead and answer this. Ironically, is your first afternoon, technically your first afternoon break. So, Deputy Gary, put them in the box in 10 minutes.
All rise.